Good morning, and thank you for joining Zeppel's Hands-On Lab. Today is February 11th. This is a recorded session. We also ask we do not use the Zoom webinar format. We use the meeting format. So we just ask that you put yourself on mute. This is an interactive session, and we do encourage lots of questions. So during the presentation, Dax Jean-Pierre, our solutions architect, will do intermittent breaks. But also, please feel free to use the chat function. I monitor that, and we welcome all conversations. And again, thank you for joining our hands-on lab. And with that, Zach, take it away.
All right, just quick sound check. Adrian, can you hear me? And is my screen coming through?
I can see your, yep, screen's coming through.
Awesome. I'll also turn on my video so that you guys can put a face to the voice and name. But nice to see everybody here. I hope you all are having a good week so far. We run this hands-on lab every other week. So if you get distracted, pulled away, or have to, or just want to come join us again, we'll be running this lab every other week. And sometimes we have some guest speakers, either from existing Zeppel customers or from our head or chief data scientist. Sometimes we'll run the session as well. So keep your eyes peeled for future sessions. So for today's agenda and overview, what I want to walk through are two things at the beginning, just about Zeppel and why leverage Zeppel and what we do and who we are. But then the meat of the time spent here today will be actually getting our hands on Zeppel. I'll have everyone sign up for a free account. And then I'll give you all of the steps and content that you need in order to get started. So I've got a sample notebook that we're going to import into Zeppel. We'll talk about the different sharing capabilities and what we have running behind the scenes and the compute options that you have in Zeppel. We'll connect to a data source and talk about those concepts. And then we'll run through the example. And what we have, what I've prepared for us all to run through today is a anomaly detection notebook where we're looking at a bunch of bank transactions. And we're going to detect if those transactions appear fraudulent or not based off of our data set. And again, this is an example and that you can use and apply to your own business. If you aren't a financial services company or deal with financial transactions in your data, you probably have some sort of anomaly detection that you're doing that maybe applies to your business. So this is really meant to give you a start to finish overview of Zeppel. And at the end, I hope that you can take the information here and run with it. So let's dive in. And as Adrian said, please feel free to drop comments or questions as we go. If I'm going too fast or too slow, let us know. So let's start with just a quick overview of what Zeppel is. And there's a lot of different components on the screen that I'm gonna show you, and I'll walk through all these different components and how they work together, because Zeppel is a notebook-powered analytics platform for your cloud data or cloud data warehouse. So we do more than just put a notebook or data science notebook in the cloud. And that's what I want to walk through right here at the beginning as far as an overview. So the way that we break down this problem is sort of in three key areas. One is what exists in your business as far as data, the files that you interact with, and the people and teams that you interact with. That's on the left side of the screen here. And then how do we make that in the middle a really seamless experience for everyone on your team or in your company as a broader team to be able to interact with the same set of data or interact with the same insights and output that you're getting from Zeppel or from the notebooks and data science work that you're doing, and make that really fast and easy for you to get to the right side of the screen, which is ultimately the value of what we're delivering. So you have the ability to collaborate really easily, the ability to deliver a solution to your stakeholders or your consumers, and then ultimately, how do you build insights, whether it's visual or non, in order for the other parts of business to consume. So if we look at the middle part of the screen here, this is really the Zeppel service that we've broken down here into three components. The first one at the top is the interface, right? That's really what you're going to be working with today. And the main component in that is the Zeppel notebook. Within the notebook, you're going to have the ability to work with multiple languages: R, Python, Spark, so Scala, and you can even run SQL directly inside of these notebooks. And on top of that, what we've built is some custom visualization libraries that makes it really easy for you to use the user interface to build visualizations versus having to use all of the familiar libraries for these different programming languages. We've built in version control directly into the notebooks. You can schedule your notebooks to run as jobs. This has become really popular and has become a major point of emphasis for a lot of our customers. Once they have done their data exploration and they've built a notebook to be set up for success, to either clean data, prepare data, maybe deliver a report as a visualization, then they'll typically set those things up to run on a schedule. And then the other component that we've built into the notebook, which is slightly different than what you might have in open source data science notebooks, or you might have to put together multiple different technologies. We have a code snippet feature that I will show you guys as well. So when you do write something in your notebook, maybe a connection string to a data source, for example, or you have a set of core functions that you use for data manipulation or processing, you can save those as individual code snippets and then drop them into any notebook that you have. And we've seen this help customers get up and running really fast for new folks that are new to maybe the different programming languages, or new to data science, or people that are getting ramped up on their teams. And then so that's the experience that you're going to see inside of the notebook. And then as we move down, the next logical question is, how does Zeppel take that code and actually execute it in an intelligent way? And how do we make sure that my notebooks are going to run on Adrian's machine and so forth? Well, what we've done is, since it's a fully cloud-based SaaS platform, is there's different components to enable anyone to be able to run anyone else's notebook. And the first core piece is the container. So each notebook that we spin up will execute, and it'll spin up its own isolated container. This helps with two things. The reason why we have designed it this way is, one, for performance. So you're never going to be put into a job queue with a shared resource. You have your own dedicated container, and it can scale up and down for what you need. So if you only need a few gigabytes of memory resource, you can provision it for that, or you can scale those up as large as they need to go. The second piece that the reason why we've architected it this way is, it's also a lot more cost efficient to have containers that you spin up and spin down. So you only use the compute that you need when you need it. There is no concept of shared resource for the container, so you aren't wasting resources or paying for idle CPU times and cycles. The next part of those resources is a cluster resource. So you can attach notebooks to a cluster node. And that is designed very similar to the containers. And this is something that we're rolling out in preview right now. So I'm extremely excited to be talking about that. And that's going to give us the ability to scale and start accomplishing dynamic workloads that are parallel in nature. The third thing that we built into our infrastructure, which helps make sure that everyone has the same libraries and versions, is our images. So we can build an image. I'll show you what that looks like in the actual UI. But an image in the Zeppel language is all the libraries libraries of specific versions that you build out and package together for Python, R, and the Spark context. Okay. Um, and then, thirdly, at the bottom is the things that maybe your management are going to be interested in, or your boss's boss, the people that are conscious of monitoring the cost and spend of the different tools and the time used for your team to build those tools. And then also maybe your IT and security folks are going to want to know where data is located and how it's transferred and moved. And really the enterprise security features that we built into Zeppel help with a lot of those discussions that go back and forth as your data science team starts to grow and impacts the rest of the business. So we've built in single sign-on into the platform so that you can have the proper gates necessary to log in. You can provision users and make sure that they have the right level of permissions in Zeppel to see and run whatever notebooks that might be there. We also have user tracking. So I think this is really valuable when you start to get to the cost monitoring and you want to know who's running what containers and how many credits are they using. And we can start to answer those types of questions to bring in some governance into the huge data science universe of tools that exist out there. Okay, so we'll continue to talk about some more of these security features. One other one that I haven't actually listed on here is more around the data access. Zeppel never actually stores your data because our containers are ephemeral. When you interact with data from a data warehouse or from a file somewhere, it's only loaded into memory for the duration of that container. And that's a really nice design, especially for the security conscious folks out there. Okay. So that's the main components here of what makes up our Zeppel platform is the unified experience of our notebook and user interface, which gives you a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities that you would otherwise have to build yourself. The ability to interact with all of your data and your files. And then we bring together all those different teams and people into a managed cloud infrastructure. So you don't have to manage any of those resources yourself. It's fully SaaS-based service. And we make sure that we do that in a secure manner. Okay. So from here, I have a few other things that I get asked a lot when we're talking about Zeppel, right? Because there are a lot of tools out there for the data scientist, and oftentimes people are asking, why use Zeppel versus any of the other open source tools out there or the other vendors? And I think it boils down to three major components that we make blazingly fast and easy. The first one is sharing. So this idea that you can share your notebooks. You could share notebooks on GitHub, right? And I can run a notebook, upload it there, and have that version be tracked, and maybe even send that link to somebody so that they can look at a graph. But none of that is interactive. There's no way to leave meaningful comments in line inside the notebooks. There's no way to execute the code that is living in GitHub. And so what we've done is we've brought a lot of those components together so that you can set up access policies. You can share either internally in Zeppel or externally. So you can set up links really quickly to just share the latest version of your notebooks. And we brought that together so that you never have to worry about this problem of someone's notebook runs on my laptop, but not on theirs, right? And commonly, people solve this using a lot of different creative solutions, like using Docker containers. But if you're dealing with non-technical users that you want to get your insights to or the results of your notebooks, they're not gonna have a great time running and installing Docker. So the first thing, yeah, that I would say for why leverage Zeppel is the ease of sharing all of the work that you're doing as a team. The second piece is in collaboration. So collaborating collaboration means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The first step in collaboration is bringing everything together into one place and making it easy for multiple people to see the exact same results and the exact same code within those notebooks. And so having a centralized place to do that, we built out some different features like inline comments in the notebooks as well as automatic versions, so you can make commits inside of Zeppel and see exactly when and who made those changes. And that really helps and reduces the amount of time that it takes to iterate through these notebooks, besides maybe emailing them back and forth. And then the third one is, stop wasting time trying to scale or run your own compute resources. We talked about the potential cost savings of not wasting CPU resources by sending jobs, notebook jobs, to a central shared resource. But being able to then also make sure that that scales as needed per job is something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about at Zeppel. So resizing the memory footprint for each notebook and never being queued in your jobs, or never queuing your jobs in a shared server, I think is a huge win. And you're always guaranteed the resources that you provision in Zeppel. So sharing, collaboration, and scalable compute without having to actually run the infrastructure itself is a huge benefit of why you should move to Zeppel, or at least explore it. And that's why we're here today. So I'll take a pause here and see. That was kind of a lot of information. We did an overview of Zeppel. We talked about three major components for why our customers move to Zeppel or leverage it. Are there any questions? Please feel free to drop them in the chat if you have any questions so far. Okay, Adrian, I'll let you monitor the chat, and we'll give just a few more seconds here and then move forward. Okay, everyone probably wants to get to the fun stuff where we actually jump into the lab. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, I'm gonna pull up a different screen here for everyone, and we'll walk through a few components. So as we go, I want everyone to follow along with me. And if you already have a Zeppel account, great, go ahead and log into that. We're gonna spend the first 2 to 3 minutes here signing up for a new Zeppel account. And then we'll get logged in. And from there, I'm gonna go ahead and share with you guys a sample notebook that I have out on GitHub. We'll talk about what that is and kind of the first steps that you want to do when you get to Zeppel. So for everyone that doesn't have a Zeppel account yet, go ahead and navigate to app.zeppel.com/register. And I will throw this in the chat as well as a link. And once you're there, go ahead and type in your business email. I am Zeppel employee here. Okay. And then we'll just do the validation. We'll send you an email to verify your identity. Make sure you aren't a crypto miner or something of the sorts. Okay. Go ahead and hit next, and we'll validate our account. All right, and then we'll log in. So once we're here, maybe give me a thumbs up or just an okay in the chat, and then we'll move forward. Okay. All right. Well, I looks like most everyone has made it this far. If you haven't, let me know, and then or yeah, drop a chat and let us know, and then we can always double back on any of these sections here. So I'm going to identify myself. I'm a data scientist at heart. And then there's a bunch of content that we have out there for you guys to get started. So anything along the lines of videos, we produce a lot of videos. We've got documentation and getting started guides. So just right off the bat to kind of orient you with where to find content as you're going through Zeppel and you're trying it out. We have a learn section down here, which will link you directly to our documentation. And then we also have some in-app resources to help you get started, some trial guides. We'll always release and let you know when product updates are pushed. And we have a live chat. So if there's a lot of resources out there to help you get started. So please, don't hesitate to reach out and take a look at some of those guides as we build them out. All right, so now that you've logged into Zeppel, let's just orient everyone with some of those key components that we talked about. We have several built-in features that make it really easy to support collaboration and security. So down here in settings, this is where you'll actually invite users, and you can invite whoever you want into Zeppel and then group them together within a specific team. And teams and users will be able to share notebooks with each other. You'll be able to specify who can run a notebook, who can clone a notebook, and so forth. So you have read write permissions that you can set up for members and for teams. So I highly recommend, once you start getting going on Zeppel, feel free to spread the love and invite different team members to try it out. It's really, just as simple as sending an email invite into the platform. Some of your IT and security teams might be interested in, what are the access policies that you set up, and we have a lot of organization level permissions that you can specify, like who can create data connections and who can remove them. For example, that's all built in here into our security policies. The next thing that you might be interested in when you get started, and we'll touch on this once we import the notebook, but these are the core resources that you're going to be interacting with. One is our containers, like we discussed. That's what runs our notebooks. The second is our images. We'll have a pre-built image for you that you can use. You can also create your own. And then we have data sources, so data objects or data connections, whether you're using Snowflake, BigQuery, S3, Redshift, MySQL Server, whatever the data source is, we can connect to it. Okay. So from here, let's actually import our first notebook. And I want to just call out over here this add new section. Go ahead and select that and then select import notebook. Okay. So when you're getting started, you probably have some Jupyter or Zeppelin notebooks that you're all familiar with and that you have built and run elsewhere. You can upload files this way, or you can upload a notebook from a URL. And what we're going to do is actually upload a notebook from my Git repository. You can see here that I've got a few starter notebooks for our hands-on lab. And I'm going to go ahead and share this with you all, just also so that you can see. I will just show you what the actual notebook looks like. Notebook view or a downloaded Zeppelin or Jupyter notebook is just JSON. And so I'll copy and paste this link in the chat. And if you're still with me here, go ahead and copy that link. And we're going to paste it back in Zeppel in this fetch from URL. Now, you can give a title, but this notebook already has a title, so it'll just automatically populate. You can always change that later. So go ahead and click apply once you've copied and pasted that link into the fetch from URL. and you'll see we have the start of our anomaly detection notebook. It's got all of our code that we need in order to run this today. And I'm going to walk through each different section, what we're doing here, and if there's any questions along the way, let me know. So great. All right, so this is the zeppel notebook, right? If you are a Jupyter user, you might be interested to try out our different view modes and use our Jupyter mode here. It's called Juno. We also have a really nice, easy way, once you've run your notebook, to turn that into a report, a viewable report, which hides all the code and just shows all of the output in a really nice, pretty way. So that is great for when you're trying to go into a presentation or you're doing something, you're sharing your screen over Zoom. Turning them in, these notebooks into reports is really powerful. Okay, I'm just going to use the default setting. And let's actually go ahead and set up our environment. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do is install a Python library. This whole notebook is Python, but we can also run R and Spark as well. This library is called Imbalance Learn, and I would have you guys go ahead and run this first paragraph. This is going to help us later on when we have to balance our data set. So go ahead and start that up, and you'll notice that the paragraph is running, it's executing, and something happened up here where we actually started a container, and that's running behind the scenes. And you'll notice that we are running a container that has 8 GB of memory, and the idle shutdown time is 60 minutes. So if we don't interact with this or run any code in 60-minute window, it'll automatically shut it down. And we'll track the container runtime down to the second. So we won't be billing you for an hour's worth of runtime if you only use it for 15 minutes or something like that. Okay. There's also a manual shutdown here. All right. So now that that's running, we've installed a library. We executed a bash command called pip, and we've installed this library. Now we want to import. So go ahead and run this this next paragraph here, and we'll actually import all of our libraries. You'll notice that you aren't seeing any output, and that's because we have a few sections here, features that will show you and hide the output. I've hidden these outputs here just for cleanliness, but feel free to interact with all of these different functions inside the notebook. The next thing that we want to do is actually build out a user input. So if you have different user inputs that you want to interact with maybe a text field or a dropdown or checkbox, what we're doing is actually just calling a simple function using a built-in library called Z and calling this text box function. We'll assign a variable name once we input the value. And if you update this and click enter, it'll update that variable. Now, where that's used is down here where we're actually going to read in data from a public S3 bucket. Okay, so go ahead and run this paragraph. We'll see this execute and just output that it finished. Okay, so one of the things that I talked about in the overview was about how we connect to data and files that you might have. One way is to use public endpoints, which is great, but your organization probably has data that's protected behind username, password, and authentication methods. So what we've done is we've set up a few different ways, or we set up one way to connect to any data source that you might have. And again, you'll see this Z library here. But in order to connect to S3, if you had a protected bucket with more strict access control, you could set up a data connection and actually connect to that data source using this function. The same thing applies for Snowflake and our other data sources. And I'll just show you really quick what that would look like. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we have this data icon. And I don't have any data sources created yet. That's why we use the public S3 bucket. But for example, if we click add new here, You can see all of the data connectors that we have built out and some that are going to be released soon. I know that actually Redshift and Athena just got pushed in our latest release. So if you need access to those, let us know. To continue this example, if you select the S3 icon here, here's where you would actually put in your S3 bucket name and the shared credential, or the individual credential for accessing this bucket for this user, okay? So this makes a really clean way to make sure that your data is accessed securely. And Zeppel, we're not setting up another layer of access permissions from Zeppel. We're merely piggybacking on top of what your team or IT group has already set up for you. So we guarantee that we're doing this in a secure way from Zeppel. Okay. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, if I don't want to use this methodology here that Zeppel has built in, can I use the standard APIs for these libraries and do things that way with my own credentials? Well, we have this secret store, which allows you to store generic keys and secrets and strings of text. So I would recommend that you check this out, because this will all give you that flexibility as well if you want to use make any other API calls or use different libraries that require securely accessing credentials. All right. So far, what we've done is we've connected the data, we installed the library, we spun up our container, and now let's run this last paragraph here and just display our query results. And what this is doing here while it's running, you'll see another function here called z.show. That's our visualization library. Of course, you can use matplotlib or plotly within inside of the notebook. But what we've done here is wrapped several different types of visualization libraries to give you all these different UI elements to click through and build graphs yourself. We'll get into that in just a second in the next section, but I just wanted to call out that we're passing in a data frame into this one function, and no matter what the data is, we'll visualize it here, and you can start interacting with it in the UI. Now, to continue that example, let's run through these visualization steps. We're going to prepare our data, remove null values, just clean things up. And then I've got two built-in visualizations that we've already created for you. And if you run those here, you'll notice they're two different graphs, but they're calling the exact same function, okay? The exact same line of code. The value of this is it makes it really simple to start interacting with different charts. So if you select this Plotly chart, and our editor here will pop up a list of different types of graphs that you can select from. You can add multiple graphs over each other or multiple traces over each other. And what this is actually doing is wrapping Plotly into the UI. So if you're familiar with Plotly and the transforms functions or the styling functions that they have for setting plot names and or axes names and setting color scales and so forth, all of those capabilities, like annotations as well, are all built into this UI editor. And so, for the folks that maybe want to get up and running quickly, all you have to do is connect to data, call that show function, and you can start interacting with all of the different columns inside of your data frame from within inside of this UI. Okay. So feel free to play around with this as you go. Some of these other built-in functions give you similar capabilities. I prefer, just personal preference, the Plotly editor, but we have a lot of other visualizations as well. Let's then now go ahead and run our next two paragraphs. So what we haven't really touched on is what is the data and what are we looking at here for this use case. And that's sort of the idea behind the visualization section. So inside of our data set, what we're dealing with are transactional data set. Is a data set of transactions for our bank. And within that data set, we've got a number of different features or columns. The amount of the transaction. We have a label that we're going to use to actually make predictions on called "Is it fraud?" So that's true or false. Then we have an updated balance, um, an old balance, and the stage of the transaction. So here we're just visualizing using matplotlib all of the potential skew in the different variables that we have, so we can get an overview of our data. And it actually looks like from the this fraud section here, it looks like we have a very skewed data set where most all of our transactions are non-fraudulent. Okay, so we can visualize that in the next cell by comparing the two different um, sets of data. Oh, sorry, this is the correlation matrix. I want you guys to make it down here to this data is skewed section. So it looks like in our data set, we have only 6 values that are actually labeled as fraudulent. Okay, so that might make it really challenging for our model to be able to actually train effectively on and recognize what an actual fraudulent transaction is. Very, very common skew in this type of data set. Okay. So how do we get around that? In the next section, we're going to actually build a model and evaluate it. And then we'll talk about a few other components that you can use in Zeppel for what to do next, how to present this externally and share this outside of Zeppel once you've actually finished your analysis. Okay. So we have an imbalanced data set, and most all of our transactions are fraudulent. So what we're going to do is actually use this this technique in oversampling in this imbalance learn library that we installed. Essentially, we're going to split our train and test data, and then we're going to balance that data set, and we'll visualize what our new train data set looks like after we run through this. So go ahead and run this paragraph here. It should execute pretty quickly. These next 2 paragraphs are, I hid the code because it's a little bit messy, but we're essentially printing HTML to the front end using Python. And we're saying before we oversampled, what was our skew? And then during and after oversampling, what was our training and label of our data set? So it looks like now that we have a much more balanced, we have the exact same number of fraudulent, which would be these labels, versus non-fraudulent, which would be these labels for our data set. And then we're going to pass that new train and test data set into a TensorFlow Keras model. Okay. There's a few layers that we'll run through, and we'll run it over 10 different epochs with a batch size of 10. So I've already built this out for you guys, but feel free to modify it, add different layers, make this your own. And as this is running, I've hidden the output, but we'll see all the different iterations on the screen once it has completed. Okay. Great. So while that's running, there's been a lot. We haven't actually updated any of the code for inside of this notebook because I gave it to you pre-built. But a lot of times people ask me questions around, as I'm iterating over multiple different versions of this model, how can I track the changes that I'm making, either in the results that I'm visualizing or in the actual code? And so on the right-hand side of the screen, as you're working, what Zeppel's been doing is actually automatically tracking versions for any code changes that you make or any result output changes that get rendered to the screen. And of course, you can make updates manually. So we can call this first model run. And once we commit that then you can always actually render the preview of what happened at that exact time. So you'll notice down here, if we scroll down, when we'll see exactly when this was executed and the state of the notebook. And then you can always roll back as well to a specific version of state. So as I'm working through multiple model iterations, I like to make those commits and changes, as I'm making changes, but know that if you forget, we're automatically tracking those as well. Okay. So the final thing to do inside of this notebook is actually run and evaluate how our model performed as we, over the training process. And then, ultimately visualizing our accuracy here. So our accuracy is quite high. I think, for the folks out there, if you saw an accuracy of this level, you're probably a little bit skeptical, and you would, maybe go back and make some changes or reevaluate your train and test data. But, for the purpose of the example here, I think just to recap, we went from start to finish of creating an account to importing a notebook and actually running through each different steps where we imported data, balanced our data set, cleaned it up, made visualizations, and then ultimately build a TensorFlow model all within inside of the runtime container that we have here. So let me.
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah. Let's say hello. Okay. Yeah, so there's a question about what format can we export these notebooks or export the code here. So that's a great segue, I think, into to what do you do next? So export capabilities for zeppel, you can always export these notebooks as an actual notebook file or a JSON file. And that's really great when you want to start maybe actually sharing the notebook file itself. You can also share these notebooks through the UI here. And so when you start to add new users, let me see if I can do this to myself. Well, when you start to add new users, we'll actually be able to share these notebooks with inside of zeppel. And then you'll have different levels of permission. So you won't actually have to export any of the code itself. But then as you start to iterate through this and you have different visualizations, you can also export these things as a PDF as well. Okay.
Zach, we have a question here.
Okay, yeah, go
In
ahead.
what format for the code, please?
Yeah, Adrian, just address that. And
Okay, cool.
for Nadia for asking that question, does that help answer your question, is knowing these two export methods? Okay.
Yes.
All right, great. The other thing I would mention too is instead of just exporting the code to maybe be run on other infrastructure somewhere else, we have customers that do that. They'll export these notebook files and then run their code on other infrastructure. The other way that you could think about doing this is you can actually train your models here within inside of zeppel and have that, whether you want it to run, say, on a schedule, maybe to update that model when new data comes in or retrain that process. You can set these to run on a schedule to do that. But then you can also actually take these model files. So I know inside of the Keras library or the TensorFlow library, we could write out this model file to disk. And when you do that, then you can ultimately upload it or export it somewhere else, whether it's a blob storage in S3 or Azure. Oftentimes we have customers that do that to kind of build zeppel as part of that pipeline, where ultimately they need to have the trained model be able to be read into another part of their model pipeline as well. So know that what you develop here in zeppel doesn't have to just live exclusively in zeppel. You can always export those types of objects or files outside of the platform as well. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions from the group here? There's one or two additional features that I want to highlight, but yeah, it looks like we have one more question, or maybe that's Paul just raised his hand. Okay. Okay. So the last few things that I want to talk about, which I painted the picture of at the beginning of the session, was if we go ahead and stop this this container, I want to show how you can actually set the different container settings for any runtime that you're doing. So within side of the notebook settings up here, you have the ability to select multiple different container sizes, okay, as well as attach a specific image. And what that looks like when you attach a specific image is we'll actually show exactly what libraries and versions are being loaded into that container. Okay, so you can keep track of all the libraries that you have running, and then also within inside of our resources, this containers tab will show you what capabilities you have and what sizes that you can run your notebooks over. So we will scale from 4 gigabytes to 128 gigabytes. All of these different containers, you can either create your own or you can set up different settings here. So instead of having to build Docker files and containers and so forth, we've done all of that for you. We'll automatically shut it down so you never have to worry about running your containers over the weekend or something like that and getting a huge bill. We'll handle all of that orchestration for you. And all you have to focus on is inside of the notebook, just selecting the right size of container for this workload. Okay. All right. Then the final thing that I want to share with you guys, and then I'll stop talking and open the floor up for any questions, is something that's really popular is being able to actually publish the work that you've done to a URL. And so every single notebook can be published, and this becomes a view-only link that you can send to whoever your stakeholders are. So you can give project updates or status updates on these actual notebooks, through these published links. And this becomes a really quick and easy way to start sharing all the work that you're doing without having to stand up or provision any sort of systems for non-technical users to consume this data. Okay. All right. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and take a pause, see if there's any questions, and yeah, I'll open up the floor. And Adrian, Paul, if I missed anything that you think will be valuable to highlight for the folks on the phone, then let me know.
Everyone, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. We definitely encourage an interactive session. Thank you. Okay, with that, we can wrap it up. Zach, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. For everyone who's on the phone and who made it this far with me, what we like to do with our customers, if you're open to it, is you can sign up, for that free trial, and then we'd love to, engage with you however possible, and typically we run a 14-day trial where we actually get hands-on with you and help you actually go start to finish with a certain use case that you might have. So if that's something of interest, please feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we have a ton of information online between our documentation, our blogs, and our videos. So please feel free to check that out and have fun with zeppel. I hope that this was a good start for everyone with a functioning notebook. And yeah, if you have any questions, again, my email here is zack@zeppel.com, and I'd be happy to talk more with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach, for a great job and presentation. To everyone who attended, thank you. We will be sending out a recording and a follow-up within 1 business day. But you do have my email contact information. You also have Zach's if you'd like to reach out to us a little early. But do expect a recording. And our next hands-on lab will be February 25th. Have a great day. Thank you for joining again.